welcome everyone. This is Anissa Avon. Thank you so much for being on this webinar today, The Employee Experience, Finding and Driving Core Values in Your Organization. So as we begin, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. First, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, the Whitmarsh Consulting Group. David Whitmarsh and the Whitmarsh Consulting Group are a pretty phenomenal group of marketing consultants and human resources consultants and online experts. They have certainly supported our organization and many of our clients' organizations in improving their footprint online. To learn more about David Whitmarsh and the Whitmarsh Consulting Group, you can go to bestpracticeinhr.com, or you can see there on the screen his email to get in touch. So now I'd like to do a little bit of introductions. First, I want to introduce you to myself and Turnkey Coaching Solutions. My name is Anissa Avon, and I founded Turnkey Coaching Solutions in 2004 with the intention of providing a pretty unique service for human resource professionals and learning and development, organizational development professionals inside organizations. We provide enterprise learning and development solutions. Our goal is to support our HR partners in driving strategic initiatives, very different than what we find a lot of HR folks have the time to do, which is, oh, we have an issue, let's throw some strategies at it and hope something sticks and hope that it's aligned with our strategic priorities. So our goal is to drive business results by improving organizational culture, and we want to help you do that by working with us as a single point of contact for your coaching, training, organizational development needs. And so today we're going to talk about core values and specifically provide an action strategy for helping you build and develop your core values in your organization. Before I go there and introduce Mark Freeman, I want to share with you that at the end of today's webinar, we're going to be offering something that's pretty unique that we've not done before, and that is a specific mastermind group for human resources and OD professionals that are looking to work with their peers and perhaps work in a strategic manager. The strategic mastermind partnering will be a once a month grouping where we get together and support folks like yourself in more deliberately outlining and rolling out your employee development, your organizational development, your team development, your hiring programs, your assessment programs, etc. So I'm going to be excited to talk more about that a little bit later. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to Mark. Mark, I'm watching you online. I'm getting all kinds of confused. So there we go. We're back in business. All right. So I want to introduce you to Mark Freeman. Mark and I and Turnkey have worked together a number of years now. Mark is the consummate OD professional. He's a senior level, extremely experienced organizational development consultant. He has worked with our organizations in the areas of team development, executive coaching, 360 feedback. He's also done curriculum design for us, and our clients never fail to say, wow, what a fantastic job. He is also a member of the adjunct faculty of a number of colleges there in Florida. Let's see, was it Rollins College? And yeah, Rollins College in Winter Park, Stetson College in DeLand. Is it DeLand, Florida, Mark?
DeLand, Florida. Yeah.
DeLand. University of Central Florida. He does everything from executive coaching to training to curriculum design for leadership development programs. He works with corporations, small and medium-sized business, and he even works with nonprofit clients. So Mark, tell us what exactly makes you the expert around building core values in an organization.
Well, I think core values, I'm so excited about offering this webinar because core values are so essential to success, and I think they're misused in a lot of organizations, and this is a place where HR professionals can really, really shine by figuring out the way they're actually supposed to be used in an organization, not simply on your document with your mission, your vision, and core values, but how you actually can bring them into your culture and work with them on a daily basis to make sure your culture is right. I love this workshop because it is a win-win for HR. It is a win-win for your organization. And you finally are able to solve people issues with something that's systematic and really, really interesting in the way that this is being developed. So that's what my excitement is. I have done this with organizations, and it's been a game changer for them. So I'm going to be discussing the real core values in your organization. We're going to look at how you hardwire them so they aren't the flavor of the week or the month from your organization, and just exactly how it maintains and creates a healthy culture. I'm also going to use the Q12 from the Gallup on how you can enhance engagement and retention, and also evaluate managers and supervisors to make certain that they are following the core values as well, which is critical because people leave, they quit people, they don't quit companies. They quit supervisors often and managers. So we're going to talk about how we can not only hardwire them, but how you can make the invisible visible using the Q12.
We have a poll. We want to get you guys' input into how would you categorize your organization's core values and awareness. So what does this actually mean, Mark? What is it that we're asking?
We're asking whether your core values are simply on the shelf, that they are maybe known or taken for granted. We're wanting to know if they're commonplace or they are actually exactly what your culture is. Commonplace core values are not necessarily what your core values are, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. And then aspirational core values, the ones you hope we have, but you don't know whether you have them or not. And then whether your core values are known to everyone in your organization.
Ask a question about that. It's one thing to know what the poster on the wall says about our core values. In this particular question, are we asking when we say known to all, that means that they are living the core values, that their behaviors as a whole, the behavior of the organization as a whole represents those values?
Yes, and that actually people are analyzed in their review process and rewarded and promoted based upon the core values, or what is sometimes called nebulous culture. This is a way to make what is kind of not so grounded into something very, very real and tangible. So that's what I'm really asking. If your core values are known to all, practiced by all, and evaluated by employees, that would be your answer to choosing core values known and practiced by all.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. So I think that we're coming to some, we're slowing a little bit on the answers. So I'm going to go ahead and just in a second end our poll. So, and I'll show the results to everyone. I'm going to share the results.
Okay,
All right,
so
here's our results. So core values taken for granted, we've got about 10%. Commonplace values, so to me, that's about 25%. Both the commonplace and taken for granted are somewhat similar in my view. Is that your perspective as well?
yes, and the aspirational values are the hopes. And so, yeah, you've got about 45% who are wanting it to be core values known by all. And whether core values are known by all and in practice daily, that's what we'll find out today. Hopefully we'll have another poll that'll indicate that later. That's great. That gives us a really good sense of what your interests are.
All right.
Okay. So one question is, well, who cares? Why do you have core values? And I love Peter Drucker's famous quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, so in other words, core values are a way to make your culture come alive and to identify it and develop it as a culture with core values. So when they're truly integrated, it creates a secure, safe, and great work culture. And so you're terminated, hired, promoted, rewarded based upon whether the core values are there. So you have a people analyzer. And then being on a great team will create a strong culture of core values. In other words, and part of that great team is the quality of the supervisor on that team. And I think, as we know, the number one reason people leave companies due to a poor relationship with their immediate supervisor. And in my estimation, I think that individual often does not demonstrate the core values, and there's no way to analyze it except for anecdotally with complaints to HR, et cetera. And the old adage, people quit people, they don't quit companies. And everybody in the organization has to exhibit the core values and go through the people analyzer, which we'll talk about here in a minute.
And Mark, what's the difference between core values that are ideals, they're idealistic values where we're working with a client right now whose CEO founded the company, and his particular values are what's on the poster, so to speak. But the organization has had a number of mergers and acquisitions, and it's evolved and it's changed. And so part of the HR strategy has to do with meshing what the older leadership team believes are the values, which are much more about idealism than actuality. So what are you finding, and will you get to this in the course of our webinar today, about how to determine whether or not an organization's values are idealistic, or are they actually the values that are going to drive their success and drive a happy, healthy work culture?
When the HR team or the leadership team gets together, the process of uncovering the core values that are really there is embarked upon. And I'm going to go through that process with you to find out what the true cultural and the core values are versus what the hopes or ideals of maybe the original leadership team or the CEO or the entrepreneur who started the company. Because the ones that are uncovered from all the people actually come from people that the leadership team nominates candidates who best depict the core values of the company, and people that they would like to clone, people that they would like to see more of. And so the culture can change and morph based on the volume of people in the company. And what you're wanting to do is taking the best of the best and figuring out what that is. So it's a discovering of what's actually there versus what might be thought of as idealistically there. So you really want to uncover the real culture. So the core values exercise that I'm going to describe today does just that. And if there is a gap between the ideal values and what the core values really are from the employee's perspective, that's interesting. And we have to pay attention to that because it's a change management process that may be occurring within the company in the way that we're hiring, in the way that we're promoting and rewarding based upon those. But I think you'll find it pretty interesting process when we go through it. So why are we doing this? We're doing this because there are a number of workplace horrors that are in the data from SHRM and other places. Like, for example, that 50% of American workforce is not engaged. That's a sorry, sad statistic, and I think that's directly related to who we hire and whether we're hiring based on core values or not. So there's a match between what the person wants and what the organization is. HR professionals, nearly half of them lift retention as their top challenge in their work. And I agree with that, because retaining good employees is the key. If the core values are hardwired into the culture, number one, we're hiring correctly to match that. And number two, who would leave if they're in a culture that they really love? And only 16% of employees say they feel engaged and connected to their employer. These are interesting stats that all relate to our work. And then here in 2017, the survey was done by corporations, 80% of which said, we need to improve our corporate culture. So even at the highest level of the organization, they're seeing that there's a strong need for this. And I found this statistic very interesting. In 2017, it cost 33% of an employee's salary to replace them. And I think we all know that you've seen cost comparisons of what it costs, $40,000, $50,000 to replace an employee, but this is an interesting way of looking at it. How much does it cost in real time based upon salary? And this is a sad state of affairs as well. 60% of more than 64% of the American workforce thinks their workplace has a negative impact on their well-being. Well, if the core values are adhered to, practiced, lived daily, and you know what you're getting into when you hire on to a company and organization, then that's not going to be true. So I think it really addresses a lot of all of the concerns that we have about employee engagement. I also found these statistics pretty interesting as well. Workplace joys. A great culture accounts for 20 to 30% differential in the increase of profitability in a core values-oriented corporation versus culturally unremarkable competitors. So you want to talk about a competitive advantage. People work harder at this level to ensure that the core values are maintained and that they are lived, and they want to produce more because it's in alignment with their own personal values. And I think a great culture keeps employees actively and passionately engaged. Because why would you not? If it's matching who you are and what your goals are at work, it's definitely going to have that impact on you. And something that's all very important to us is 30% less turnover when they're integrated well, as maybe the 55% of you who feel that the core values are known to all, hopefully not only known to all, but lived by all, and you enjoy a 30% less turnover rate. It's a primary recruiting tool in many organizations because your core values are very unique to you, and they're very different. They're going to be very idiosyncratic to your culture. So they're not going to look like core values that are generic. And I found this interesting when you're recruiting new people, that sometimes they'll accept a 7% lower salary just to work in a good core values explicit culture versus a really, really difficult cutthroat cultural environment. And core values are the essence of a company's identity, not the mission statement as much, and the vision statement. Those are great, and that's why we work there. But the core values are the glue that hold it all together. Any thoughts, Anissa?
I think that's very telling. Trying myself attempting to stay on the leading edge of best practices in organizational development. I read a lot of books about successful companies versus companies that are not as successful. And one of the things that stands out for probably most of us on the call that have read any of the books that the Zappos CEO have read is how important culture really is to the bottom line of an organization. And so for HR professionals who are seeking to build a case to do culture work, and most of the time it's change management work, or rolling out a values initiative that really integrates it with the culture, there are some really great learning experiences that can be taken away from the statistics you've just provided, as well as reading up on organizations like Google or Zappos or some of the others that have done a great job at building into the heart of who they are their core values.
Mm-hmm. People retain there, and often the right people retain, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a sorting practice that allows you to have the highest performers who are the easiest to get along with because they're remarkable people with remarkable emotional intelligence. And that's in a sense what's happening here. But I want to get really tactical with you and show you a really unique opportunity. You can try this out. If you don't want to roll it out with the whole leadership team of your company, roll it out in HR. And just do this as an exercise and see what happens. I think you'll be really pleasantly surprised. So how do you uncover the true values of your culture? Well, take your HR team and you ask all of them to write down 3 names of who in our organization, not us, no one on HR, represents the best of us. Who shines? Who stands out as a high performer who is really great to get along with? They have follow through. They're very collaborative to work with, for example, and you want to think about that and you ask them to list 3 people. Another question you can ask of your team is, who do we want to clone in the company? Who do we want, if we had 10 of those people, what would our culture be like? So each person writes 3 names down with that prompt, and then all the names are recorded on the whiteboard. What you will find is that the names appear many times, and you have, and this is confidential, but you have, hash marks with, say, Henry and Sarah, and they have 5 marks next to their names. So they've been identified by other people on your team. And then each person generates a list of all the attributes of each one of the employees that they nominated as a candidate who represents the best of us. So you have a laundry list of all these attributes on your whiteboard, for example. And you have to make one pass through the list to eliminate non-relevant values. There are a number of non-relevant values that might be important to, cast aside. They're specific of your industry, and they have to be there. They're the price of admission to work for your company, like a higher degree, or a baseline of integrity. So what we
I have a good example of that. One of our clients is aerospace. They have a manufacturing organization, and one of their units is aerospace manufacturing. And one of their core values is innovation, but it must couple with, I can't remember the exact value that as they wrote it, but it had to do with risk management and extreme attention to detail, because obviously you cannot just go innovating just anything you want on that manufacturing assembly line. So there had to be this constant play between the desire for innovation and a complete desire for safety, commitment, and risk analysis at the same time.
So there's a specificity that's in each company that's unique to that company. And that's what your HR team unfolds, or your leadership team begins to unpack and put on the board. In the second pass, you want to keep, kill, or combine similar values. So for example, a generic non-descriptive value that Anissa just described, innovation or collaboration, you have to have some specificity around that. It can't just be generic, because it loses value when it becomes too vague. So that's a generic value, something that you would see in 50 core value statements of cultures, for example. Accidental values, Patrick Lencioni coined that phrase in that it's there, but it's by accident. It's not intentionally, or we're hiring, but it's just there accidentally. So you want to filter out those that are accidental, that are not related to what you would determine on your HR team as the core. And aspirational values are, in Anissa's example, the ideals, you know, the CEO's values. Well, that may not be the culture. So you want to kind of move away from aspirational values that don't reflect the culture. So this is the filtering. Window dressing values are, like we asked you in the poll, are they generic? Are they just put up there to have some values, but they don't really have any meaning? So they're window dressing. They look good on a website, but in terms of practice, they're not really done. And then ordinary price of admission values, which I described earlier, would be what you would hire anyone for as an expectation. So we're really looking for something that's unique in your culture that may not be articulated, but you'll know it's right when you hear it. So let me give you some examples. I work in one industry where we did this core values exercise for a high-end assisted living nursing facility. And the whole team did this whole kind of practice, and one group was working with their list of people and attributes, and they put a smiley face on the whiteboard. And I, you know, it was the first graphic I saw, and I said, well, what is that? And they said, well, it's hard for us to articulate, but when you're around this individual or these two individuals, you get this sort of, you just want to smile, and you know they're smiling at you. And I said, well, can you kind of name what that feels like or what the experience is like? And they said, oh yeah, it's the smiling vibe. So think about that. You're in a high-end nursing facility. People are vulnerable due to their age, and they're either in independent care, assisted care, or this, but every employee is exhibiting the smiling vibe, which makes them feel safe, cared for, and acknowledged as important. Okay, in another organization, they found that Gumby was the best representation of their core values as one aspect. Another, the same one said, well, the other thing that we really do here and what everyone loves and the residents really like in this nursing facility and assisted living areas is that they just wait for another experience that's beyond their imagination of what we provide. So that's another one. Another one there is, we're an oasis. And think of the metaphor of an oasis. You're starving, you're completely thirsty, and there's an oasis, a safe place where you can get rehydrated. So you can see that these are perfect for a high-end nursing assisted living facility. And then their last core value is the security that's found in the competence of staff. So these are not core values that are on anybody's page. They're very, very unique to this company, to this experience. And that's what you're looking for. And when your leadership team articulates what all these words mean on the whiteboard, they're drilling down into what's already there and just naming it. So that's how you kind of begin to assess what the core values are. You don't stop there though. You wait a week, you wait a couple months. Do they still have traction? Do they still have sensibilities? Do we have the labeling right for what it is? So in that regard, let's suppose after a month's period of time, we have the whole experience cataloged, and we have the core values really, really articulated well in the culture that are exactly like who we are. Well, what you want to do is your leadership team, and particularly your CEO or executive director, or whomever is in the role of articulating to staff what things mean, is that you create story narratives around each one of your core values using employee examples. So the CEO is crafting, with the leadership team's buy-in, the core values speech. And this speech is read at every company meeting, every event, and some reference to it is made so that it is always visible and rolled out. And it's talked about at each quarterly meeting so that you kind of understand where things are and how things are going. I want to step back to, and it's just messaged in every possible way. Employees, as you know, need to hear something 7 times before they think it's real. So as a leadership team, as an HR team, you have to have it out in your community, in your culture 7 times before it's paid attention to as a non-flavor of the week, that it's a permanent infrastructure for your organization. So it's tied to onboarding, it's tied to orientation, it's tied to recruitment. I even have HR recruiters that discourage people from applying unless they have these 4 core values, because they just don't want to make a mistake in hiring, have someone leave. So someone really has to be wanting to be part of this culture in terms of hiring tough to bring the right person on board. Okay, so that's what that is. So I want to jump back to step 4.
Okay, good, because we had that question and it was in my mind too. I was thinking, wait, we're out of order. What's step 4?
We are. So
but I have a question for you before you begin.
Okay.
David asked, why would you not include aspirational values? If we aspire to be better in the future, including an aspirational value could be an effective way to reward or recognize and reinforce the behaviors that support that aspirational value.
Well, we might be kind of splitting hairs here, but that's a great question, David. I really like that. If we're looking at the best of the best within the company, within the organization, there's a kind of implicit assumption that not everybody is representing those core values. So they are aspirant in the sense that maybe not every single person in the organization is emulating them. But by looking at the best of the best and exactly who in the organization is demonstrating that, we're saying what's there and what could be. So I agree with you, and I think it goes to this step 4. One way to test to see if the core values are right is you take that group that you've assessed and you run them through your 3 to 7 core values. And plus means that core value is present in that employee. Plus minus means that it's there sometimes and it's not there. And the core value being absent is a minus. So in a sense, when you think about putting your best who are on your list, they should all be getting pluses across the board. And when I've done this on the leadership team, when we get the core values, and then we do the core value analysis, the people analyzer with the leadership team, sometimes, more than sometimes, the leader doesn't have the value. And that becomes operational for them to bring it up to a plus. So then you decide as an organization, what is the bar? In my opinion, the bar is no minuses. You can't have any minus because that destroys culture. If in my company, OASIS is one of the core values, a minus on the OASIS would not be okay. And that would be, holding that employee accountable to bring it up minimum to a plus minus, maximum to a plus. So a good
And are
idea.
you talking about, I didn't mean to interrupt you, go ahead.
If you have 5 core values, maybe you allow 2 plus minuses and 3 pluses. But it becomes a issue of, let's see, performance improvement plan on the core values if you drop below whatever your bar is. And a minus is not acceptable on whatever the core values are. So you test it with your highest performers and the people you want to clone, then you know they're right. You take your leadership team through and you see where they may have some plus minuses or even a minus, okay? And then you set the bar wherever your bar is going to be. And so then you take the subjectivity out of evaluation of employees, and everybody's following this model, that they know that the people analyzer says, these are our core values, and we come together as an HR team and are in agreement that this person is in the minus category and they need some remediation to help them bring that up. And if we're unable to do that, they're not the right people. So what this does is analyze the right people for your company. And if we go back to Collins, it says, right people, right seat. Right people is the core values. And this gives you a tool to analyze the core values, to have an objective way to assess it based on behavior and not subjectivity, because you know it when it's there and you know it when it's not there. So it takes the subjectivity out of it. And I see this as a risk management tool, because if you've uncovered the core values in the company, they've come organically by your HR department, by your leadership team. They're organic values. They've been named. We've discussed them. And then if they're not there, it's risk management, because it's a process that you've gone through, and leaders are in agreement that this person's at a minus. So we give them the opportunity to make the change. But if they end up leaving the organization, it's because they can't live the core values. They're not the right people for us. They could be wonderful somewhere else, but in this environment, they don't fit. And it's more objective. It's more impartial. It's not subjective. I just don't like this individual. We have a methodology that rates them, that's protective in a litigation situation, because you're following the same process for every employee in the company. That's one reason also I love this so much. It's organic. You're using it as a tool to assess everyone the same way. It is or it isn't there based on not one person's assessment, but a group of people, and it puts you in a really safe position risk management wise, because you're not making it about nebulous impressions or subjective viewpoints of people. Does that make sense?
Really good question. It does. It makes complete sense. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to ask Mary's question. She says, can you speak to mitigation strategies when leaders don't walk the walk? This seems like a top-down approach that heavily relies on hierarchy. I'm missing the feedback loop from the team to leadership.
Okay, that's a great question, Mary Ann. We're kind of jumping. That's like at the end of this talk.
We're going to get into that when we talk about Q12, right?
Right, but I will share with you a little bit about that so you know it's coming. So there has to be an anonymous way to get feedback from supervisors and managers. And a lot of companies are using the Q12 because of its research base. And managers are evaluated based upon it anonymously by their direct reports. Often like you're in college and you do a teacher evaluation of the class. Well, this becomes part of whether the bonus happens or a promotion happens, so that bad behavior can be called out, because all of the items on the Q12 relate to employee engagement, employee development, professional excellence, being able to help them retain in your organization. So here's my bottom-up way to do this in a safe way for employees, anonymously rating. And then, there's a bar there too. So that's the high-level view of what that what that means. So I hope that answers your question, but we'll drill into that a little deeper as we move on. Okay, step 6. Every new employee, as I said, is vetted and discouraged by your recruitment team to apply to be a candidate if they do not live the core values and get excited every morning about coming to work. So it becomes essential in the recruiting process to hire tough this way, to describe what they are. Is this a place you want to work? Is this really you? Is this really how you are? When you're assessing where someone else used to work, you're asking the references. Do they live these particular core values? Because they will not be successful if they do not. And so you may get a more honest answer from a reference, perhaps, or from someone, and you want them to make an informed choice about coming to work for you. And the informed choice is just how strong these values are for success. And it's informed consent. They're consenting to come to work with you based on what it's going to be like. So it's very transparent, it's very open, and it's very, very much explicit. Like in Zappos, at the end of orientation, if you don't want to work there, they'll give you $1,000. Anyway, employee performance evaluations are predicated on the 3 to 7 core values as part of your key performance metrics, along with promotion potential. You want to promote people who are the right people. And that's important. Not the wrong people, not high performers that no one can get along with, that may not be a value in your organization, because they'll wreak havoc on your culture when they turn into a manager or supervisor, because they'll apply those same harsh expectations that they do on themselves on others. Okay, so I think it's also part of the performance process, performance improvement plan process. You can de-hire people who are not living and maintaining the core values with a 3-strike rule. So what is a 3-strike rule? A 3-strike rule is that over 30 to 60 to 90 days, there's 3 opportunities to come back in alignment with the core values. And as a leader or someone in the organization, you point out 3 behaviors that are not core based on one core value. So you take a behavior, you match it up where it wasn't the smiling vibe, like yelling at a resident for being, stupid. Okay, that's a minus on the smiling vibe, obviously. That's an extreme example. But you give specific examples, and you give them 3 examples so that the first time they may deny it, the second time they may justify it, the third time they're like, yeah, you're right, I'm not doing the core value you're describing because you've given me 3 specific examples of me not emulating that. And then, so.
Hey, Mark, real quick, I'd like to just put an exclamation point on what you just shared with us. If folks that are listening, if there's one thing that you can take away from this entire conversation, it's this piece right here of 3 examples. We work with a lot of leaders and organizations on their performance management process and performance management program. And the biggest challenge that they have is real-time feedback that the individual can actually relate to. And what the best advice that we ever provide is this piece right here. Leaders or managers or whoever is providing the feedback, if they can make a point to demonstrate their feedback with 3 examples, it will go a long way to move the needle towards either supporting that employee in adopting the core value, or on the other side, helping them to inch their way out of the organization because they disagree regarding the importance of that core value. And that one little tweak right there can be a pinnacle of success in that piece right there.
Great, thank you for that. I'm glad you highlighted that, because that's on the disciplinary side. On the other side, once the culture understands that promotions are awarded to employees that demonstrate the highest expression of core values, look how this is becoming hardwired. There's nothing haphazard about this. We're following a really, really strict process where there's a binary process of haves, people who are doing it and emulating it, and people who are not. And there's a clear distinction of that. And it becomes part of the culture that being the right people, emulating these values is exactly what's expected, because everything that's driven through HR supports it, along with your training of managers and supervisors to make certain they're doing the dehiring or the 3-strike rule with behavioral examples, or promotions with behavioral examples. And so it becomes very crystal clear in the company that these are not window dressing. They are lived and emulated by all who want to retain and be at this organization. So again, in addition, rewards, bonuses, accolades bestowed upon people, those who are living the core values, and raises are measured against the core values. So they're part of the annual process. They're part of ongoing feedback from managers and supervisors about where are you at with the core values. So it's a constant reminder to the employee that this is serious business in the company, that the culture and this leveraging the culture becomes paramount to their success and your success as a company. I can't reiterate more or stronger that the interviewing process must demonstrate evidence of hardwire core values integration. So my behavioral questions on the interview process are about our core values with examples. Give me a time in your professional life where you demonstrated the smiling vibe. Well, what's that? What kind of question is that? Here's the smiling vibe. This is something that we live in the company. This is what it means, and you explain the behavior. And they have to give behavioral responses, maybe 3 responses of things they did, behaviors they did, examples of that, that indicates they have and have integrated that. If they don't know what you're talking about and can't get it, chances are they don't have that value. It's going over their head. And then orientation and onboarding continue to hardwire the core values. No one leaves orientation with any ambiguity about what these things mean to the company, mean to the organization, mean to the employee. So again, it's ubiquitous around the whole organization, this idea of core values. So they are ever present. Okay, so I'm glad we have this poll, and I'll let Anissa talk.
I'm going to launch the poll, and since we're running a little bit behind schedule, why don't you move on to tell us about the Q12 and how organizations are using that while folks are answering this poll. And then when it slows down a bit, I'll chime in and we'll go back to the results.
Perfect. Okay, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Q12 index that Gallup did with 30 years of behavioral economic research about what is the glue that keeps employees engaged in your company. And there are 12 things that came out with 17 million employees and asked and answered. So one organization I work with, as I said, the Q12 every manager is evaluated on these 12 on a Likert scale. 1, it's not there at all. 5, it's there all the time. And so when they first beta tested this, they found out where the average they wanted to set for promotion or for bonuses, somewhere above 4.5. And it also became a developmental tool on which, with each manager, what is it that you're not doing? How can we help you with your recognition plan, that you're doing it more, at least once every 7 days with them? So it gives the organization a way to help a manager or supervisor become effective on where they are in terms of these engagement questions, which are, you know, why reinvent the wheel when there's something so valuable with such hardcore research that's been done internationally on this. So then you're just employing it for this, and it helps smoke out. Let me see, can you see this, everybody?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I close this poll? Because I can't really.
Yes. Yep,
Okay.
sorry about that. Let me just share the results real quick.
Oh,
this
great.
was our overall, how effective is your organization in hardwiring your core values? And I think what's really remarkable is that nearly 45 plus 27% that are on the call, the majority are either pretty good, sometimes or most of the time, hardwiring the core values. I think that's significant. And it's certainly not what I'm finding in a lot of our organizations that we're working with, but maybe what we're talking about is the fine tuning a lot of the time, or when there's an acquisition or formalizing the core value implementation process as well.
Perfect. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So, you know, this is assessing the manager on the core values in reference to their supervisor role. And it's good for their continued development. And it gives you a warning if there's bullying behavior or some kind of behavior that's problematic in their management style and their supervisory style. And direct reports, if they understand and truly believe they're anonymous, then you're going to get good data on supervisor performance, which I think is key for core values. They have to demonstrate that. I like to add your core values into the Q12 to see how well the supervisor and manager is doing. So it's not a Q12, it's a Q15 if you have 3 core values. It's a Q17 if you have 5 core values. But again, you're seeing how well they emulate and mirror and promote and mentor on the core values as well. Is this another poll that I can? Yeah.
Poll. Let me just, and I'm going to launch it as you continue. All right. And this is select all that apply in this case. How does your organization assess supervisor or leadership competency?
I like that, huh?
Oh, or do what?
Yeah, to me, it's you know, I have got to tell you, in many of the organizations that I work with, there's no bottom-up assessment. And coming from academics, that's how teachers are evaluated for tenure, based on patterns in their teacher evaluation. So why we're not doing it in corporate America and in entrepreneurial companies or private companies is beyond me, because it's a protective factor that someone may need some development, someone may need coaching, someone may not need to be in a leadership role if they're unable to make that transition into being an effective leader. So I hope that you have something, and it would be interesting to see what your responses are, whether there's just a kind of subjective process or there's peer reviews. So it's 42% of you, it's kind of an informal subjective process. Well, this gives you an objective process to measure that, which is fair for both the direct report and fair for the supervisor. You know, in my opinion, the informal subjective processes seem to devolve into popularity contests and not really employee engagement stats. Okay.
So one of the things real quickly that I want to touch base on is something that you said earlier, and I'm still chewing on the idea around aspirational versus ideal versus core values that relate to the actual culture. We have a client who's very, very, very busy, particularly at certain times of the year where they have seasonal deliverables that must be done. And I was reviewing their core values, and their core values are very much about driving for results and high energy and committed to the company, et cetera. What's missing from the core values is now explaining to me why many of their team members are burned out. Their core values are about high energy, high performance, driving for results, never giving up, but there's a lack of care, self-care, self-time, balance. There's a lack of any of their core values that looks like employee care. And to me, that is an example of when aspirational or ideal values leave something out that's relevant to the success of the organization.
That is really great that you said that, because it goes right to the retention problem.
Yep.
Your retention problem, and you're losing, I don't know, a significant number of people relative to burnout, then your core values are somewhat of a miscue unless you just want to run through people in your organization, burn them out, and bring new ones on. That to me does not create an engaged employee. But if you have a self-care or work-life balance or something that leverages productivity, but it also gives, you know, good healthy work-life balance, then that's probably necessary. And if you assessed some of your best employees in a focus group, that would come out. You will hear that that's going on in the culture, and not having a core value that seals off that departure predicament is problematic. It's great that you have all those results oriented, but how many people do you lose that are
They're
really
losing about 30% right now. Their turnover this last year was 28%. And that is a perfect example. So I think on number one on your slide, hardwired core values, it's really hardwired healthy core values keep the culture healthy.
Right. And you know, some person might have the expectation to work 60 hours a week, but if I can be productive at 50 and still get results, I ought to be rewarded for that as a better time manager. Anyway, this shows you that as a result of our conversation today, culture is not elusive or a nebulous thing, which people worry about. Well, culture, it's just going to destroy us, but no one can really articulate what that means. And now I think you can see how it can be really done deliberately. And this is how you do it from the inside out rather than the outside in. And you seal these values and you make them real and tangible.
This is perfect. For those of you who are on the call, I know we're coming up to the end of the hour, but I'd love for you to type in and share with us what's your takeaway from today. Mark, for me, what I'm taking away is at first we really got down in the weeds, step one, step two, but I've really, if I were to sum up what I've taken away from this, it's one, define the core values. Two, double check, you know, are the core values that you've defined really what's defining your culture, and are they valid for the results you hope to achieve, both in retention, employee happiness, and business results? And then finally, it's about the feedback loop. Mary brought up the feedback loop. Yes, it's about ensuring that the leaders are given the feedback about the core values, but your process went all the way down to new hires and every single employee in the organization. When performance management, all the way up and down the line, is evaluated against core values on a very plus minus process, then leaders have an opportunity to be the change makers to drive the culture. And without that simple process, it really becomes an HR job, and HR cannot do it in a vacuum.
Absolutely. But you can kind of pilot it in HR and test it out and see if it's something that you want to socialize with your leadership team. Hey, we did this. I did another thing. I'll explain something else. I also did a complete employee evaluation of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and asked the employees, 50 employees in this organization, who they thought emulated core values. And then when the leadership team did it, and I shared with them what the employees said, it was an exact match.
Wow.
That to me was validity and the reliability that they're there. Unbeknownst to leadership, unbeknownst to the employees, they were articulating the same dynamics in the company.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Whitney wrote, assess core values and make sure we are truly integrating them everywhere. And Dave wrote, values and practice at all levels are key and essential to a high-performing workplace culture. So some really valid and great takeaways.
That's a great
I want to talk very quickly about our HR and OD mastermind. We are launching, and with Mark at the helm, a monthly mastermind. It's group coaching, it's masterminding, it's specifically for HR professionals who are responsible for culture development, strategic employee development, HR, organizational health, and culture development. So I would welcome the opportunity to share with you more if this is something that is of interest. Do reach out. Mark, what can you share with us about the mastermind concept and this monthly program that we're putting together?
Well, I believe really strongly in consultation and collaboration with peers in a related industry like HR, that we can talk about issues and problems that we're having in common to come up with solutions, or at least get acknowledgement that we're in the same boat and these are difficult things, but get a few good ideas here and there about how we might do things differently in our work. So the mastermind process allows us to share interesting problems and ideas, and well, has anybody tried this out? And what do you think about this? To be able to look at strategy, look at tactics, look at programs that we might have, and have a shareware experience of essentially best practices that we're learning from one another. I think there are some opportunities that HR professionals have already, professional groups that they're part of, but this is more day-to-day. How you know, you have a specific issue or concern that you want to discuss, and it can be aired in this environment versus something that might be at a conference or at a consortium you might be part of. And like industries, this would be more you to really explore questions and see how others handle it, and you be able to utilize Anissa and my expertise on how we weigh in on those things from our experience.
Perfect. Perfect. So if this is something that you feel like would be of benefit, I welcome the opportunity to explore that further. We do an application and interview process because as I'm sure some of you would agree, that it's not always valuable to be in a group where you're holding the group. So I think it's important that our mastermind groups be of value to those who participate, and that means all hands on deck with equal amounts of contribution. So all right, so I know that we're coming to the end of our time together. If you guys have an interest in our FAST strategy session, which is a complimentary OD organizational development conversation, something we can help you with, or if you'd like to know more about our mastermind, do reach out. You can reach Turnkey at 281-469-4244. Or Anissa at turnkeycoachingsolutions.com. And one more, Mark, we'll leave with the telephone number on the screen there. There we go. Thank you very much. We look forward to your feedback. If there's some way that we can support you, I hope that you'll reach out. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark. That was
Thank you,
fascinating
everyone. Thank
and
you,
very helpful.
Lisa, and everyone for your participation. Great.